You're listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe, Director of Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. This is the Jewish Inspiration Podcast.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Orchos Tzaddikim, Ways of the Righteous. We're in the Treasure for Life edition on page 387. Day number 65. It is so great to be here with everyone. Habitochon Hashmini, the eighth and final form of trust that is required for a man to be happy. You want to be happy, you've got to let go. You got to let go. People think, oh, when I'm in control, then I'll be happy. No. It's when you let go that you have happiness. But who are you letting go to? Who are you letting go and giving over the power to them? Only to the Almighty. Only to the Almighty. Sabitochen Hashmini, the eighth form, is Al Inyan Olam Haba. The fear that every person has is, but you see, if I don't go to that party, I'm never going to have that opportunity again. If I don't eat that food, I'm never going to have that opportunity again. If I never do that or do this or do the other thing, then I'm going to miss out. But you know what? We mentioned this previously. Olam haba, the world to come. What is the world to come? Asher bo ne'imus le'ein ketz ve'ein cheker. The pleasure, the joy, the unbelievable. It's hard to describe it, and that's exactly what he's going to say. Ve'ein hapeh yochel lesaper yefi olam ha'u. That world can't even be described in words. Can't even be described in words. Ve'ein ha'ayin yochel liroiz ziv hadras hatzaddikim. To see the reward of the righteous is impossible. Impossible. And there's no eating there. There's no drinking there. People aren't getting drunk there. People aren't running around party to party, clubbing. Not happening there in the world to come. Oh, Rabbi, you lost me there. You said that in the world to come, there's no food and no drink? You mean I'm not going to be able to eat my brisket? You mean I'm not going to be able to drink my beer? You mean I'm not going to be able to enjoy life? Oh, what's there in the world to come? There's nothing there. Therefore, a person needs to understand and know ki kasher lo yeda hadog tanug ha'of haporeach ba'avir v'kasher lo yeda ha'of tanug hadog hashot b'yam. It's a man, he says, look, he says that the fish doesn't know the pleasure of the bird, and the bird doesn't understand the pleasure of the fish. Ki hatolados shalohen hein hipuch zo mizo, because the offspring are opposites. Ki of yamus b'mayim v'adog yamus b'yabasha. What does that mean, the offspring? The opposite. Because what happens with the fish goes out of the water, he's dead. The bird goes in the water, he's dead. That means they can only live in their own place. Kach. Therefore, a physical body that has a lofty, holy soul in it can never understand, can never even grasp what's going on in the world, which is all soul. In the world, that's all spiritual pleasure. Ki ein lanu elo tanug haguf. We only understand the pleasures of the body. Aval tanuge haneshama mitanuge ha'elyonim. But the pleasure of the soul is of the highest realm. The highest level of pleasure is the pleasure of the soul. Lo nuchal lahasigam. We won't be able to comprehend. Lo nuchal lahakirosam ela acharei rova machshava. Only after tremendous thought we'll be able to reach some type of understanding of soul pleasure, spiritual pleasure. If you want to get just an example of what spiritual pleasure is, if you've ever done something which was selfless, you went out of your way to help somebody, and the whole way back home you're like, oh, that was so special. That was so incredible. I was able to help them. That's a spiritual form of pleasure. Now imagine if you have that on steroids. Yeah, that's better than a steak. Yeah, that's better than your brisket, smoked brisket, Texas brisket. Better than any bourbon or scotch, better than any wine. It's better than any physical pleasure in the world. That feeling, I saved someone's life. I jumped off the cruise liner and I saved someone who was drowning. Tell me that you'll ever want to exchange such a pleasure of saving someone's life. That's a spiritual pleasure. But when we're in heaven, it's a whole new level of that. But that's just a little taste of it. A little taste of it. You see an older person struggling with their groceries and you help them. Yeah, I'll take it to your car. I'll help you get it into your trunk. Come, I'll help you out. No one's looking. No one's going to be like, oh, wow. Psh, well done. No, nobody sees anything. You feel good. I helped somebody. These are small little nuggets of spiritual pleasure. But imagine a world that's filled with that pleasure. That's the currency of the world to come. And by the way, my definition of this, my lowly definition of this, is nothing, says the author, compared to what it really is. It's nothing. Vizeh machmas, top row on page 388. Vizeh machmas she'anu ba'olam hagufim. We are in the physical world. Ve'al kain lo nakir ki'im tanugim ha'ovdim va'poskim. The only things that we understand are fleeting pleasures in this physical world. Avol tanugan nishamahim tamid bli hefsek. You want to know what's amazing? So as I was telling you these examples of spiritual pleasures, everyone, I saw your eyes rolling back and thinking of that one situation that you had and nodding your head saying, I remember I did something like that. I remember I had such an experience. And you're able to relive that pleasure just by thinking about it. Do you relive the pleasure of eating the good foods you ate or the good drinks you drank? No. You can't relive it. But you can relive the spiritual pleasures again and again and again and again. This is what the author is telling us here. Ve'ein bein osama tanugim ubein elo tanugim chibru v'shituf lo kurva b'shum inyon. Umishi yizkel malahi achrei moso lo yehav elo tanugim. You have to understand that someone who's invested in the spiritual realm of pleasures will not enjoy the physical realm of pleasures. It's like, it's micro pleasures. Like, it's like really, you're trying to buy me off with what? With a jelly bean? Really? Come on. I'm more mature than that. Jelly bean? Right? We know our pleasures mature as we grow. So if I tell you, here, let me give you a great worldly pleasure, I'll give you a lollipop. You'll be like, really? Really? That doesn't work. When someone is involved in a spiritual level, even the greatest physical pleasure doesn't talk to them because they've seen something so much greater. If I can for a moment, I want to share with you that my grandfather's rabbi, Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz of the Mir, the great Mir, the spiritual leader of the Mir Yeshiva in Poland. They used to say about him that anybody who touched the doorknob of the yeshiva and walked through the threshold of that front door never enjoyed the pleasures of the world that we're in today, of the physical world anymore. You know why? Because he was able to impassion his students with such a strong sense of the real worldly pleasures of the world to come, that the small worldly pleasures here were infinitesimally too small. Too small for someone to run after. After you've seen it with such clarity, you've understand it, you've seen it. So really the new drapes is going to give me pleasure. Right? The delicious cup of coffee, that's going to give me pleasure. I'm going to run after that. Physical pleasures, the motorcycles and the cars and the houses and all of those great things. They're great pleasures. But when you put them on the scale of world to come pleasures, otherworldly pleasures, doesn't match up, doesn't speak to me. Doesn't speak to me at all. It's like, imagine a king. You think he's going to take off all of his royal garments to go hang out with the boys on the street corner. Can't do that, because I've gotten to a level of pleasure that's so much higher. And even if the king is young, and even if he's, a little immature, we know if you have an immature king, or, by the way, an immature prince of England, who thinks that running around Hollywood is greater than royalty. That only comes from immaturity. That doesn't come from someone who is understanding, someone who's mature. Someone who's mature understands that being in the family of royalty and acting royally is far greater than running around with some actors and actresses. We all understand that if someone is introduced to the world to come pleasures, the spiritual pleasures, and they start playing around with physical worldly pleasures here, it's a little, you're playing in Little League. In Major League, we don't play like that, Kasher anachnu magbirim tanug ha'olam hazeh al tanug olam haba machmas chesron da'atenu u'miyut hakorosenu olam hanishamos v'tanugov. The only reason we run after worldly pleasures in this world, physical pleasures in this world, is because we're a little immature. We're a little immature. So that's important to you. I remember my father, he'd probably still say this if I were to ask him. But I remember there was a guy in synagogue who had a car that every time he'd park the car, during the week we'd go from Mincha Maariv, so we would drive to shul, and as we were walking in, this guy would park right in front, and it was the new cars that had back then, 1988, 87, 88, that the first cars that had the remote control, that they go boop, boop, and he would play with it all the time to make sure everybody saw his toy. And my father used to call him the man with the toy. The man with the toy. In a little bit of a mocking way. Why? Because what my father was trying to teach us as young children, don't get caught up in the worldly pleasures, the worldly little silliness of, boop, boop, boop. Really, that's going to get you excited. That's what we're here for in this world. We're here for so much greater. Don't get caught up in that. Kigon bnei odam shemisnakmim b'soneihem, kigon hakavod be'ez shemechabdin oso bnei odam, v'kishero odam dvaram yofim, o kishero odam bno hachaviv, shelo roe oso b'toch zman meruba, o kishomea b'suras tovos, v'chol eli yishtanu gadol b'lo achila v'shtia. We know there are many different forms of pleasures that are not eating and drinking. Seeing beautiful sights, honor that people give you, or if you reunite with a child of yours that you haven't seen in a very long time, you hear good news. These are pleasures that aren't related to physical things. But if in our physical world, we see that the soul rejoices from such pleasures, now you can understand a little bit of the pleasures of the world to come, that the neshama will be so fulfilled from those real pleasures. Now I want to give you a little bit of an insight here. We know that Joseph was away from his father for many years. When he was 17 years old, he was sold by his brothers. And then for a long time, almost 2 decades, he was away from his father. And then they finally get reunited. Joseph becomes the viceroy. Jacob comes down because there's a great famine. And then they reunite. That moment. What does Jacob, the father of the Jewish people, what does he do? Our sages tell us when they reunite and they embrace and hug. You know what Jacob said? He recited the Shema. Because even that level of physical pleasure in this world, he said, everything's for Hashem. I don't want to eat up some of my merits of the world to come. We have to recognize that there's a greater pleasure, which is the closeness, not with my physical son. There's a much greater pleasure, and that is the closeness with my Father in heaven. So at that moment when they reunited, Jacob felt that he was going to forget the closeness with the Almighty. So immediately he recited the Shema. What do you think? He wasn't excited to see his son after so many years? He thought he was dead all this time, and now he's embracing with his son. Unbelievable joy. Imagine the emotions. All of that emotion dedicated to Hashem. That's someone who understands real pleasure. And there's no physical pleasure in the world that can compare to these incredible things. As the prophet said, where he is in total awe of the glory of the world to come. He's marveled by it. He says, Marav tuvcha asher tzofanto lireyacha. How great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you. Ve'ala olam haba asher hu sof kol adam yasim bitchono al el shiyagi'eo la'olam ha'elyon ve'al yashlicheo milfanav. So now when we're talking about trust, do you know what the trust needs to be? That we keep on investing in the ultimate reward of the world to come. We're not looking for short returns. We're looking for long term. Someone who's a smart investor, what do? They don't take all of their salary and buy beer and spend it and buy toys. What they do is they save it because there'll be a time where they're going to need it more. Perhaps. They might need it to buy a house later. They might need it to buy a car later. They might need it to help them with their, when they're an elder person and they need to have assisted living, that money might come to good use. But someone who's short-sighted, doesn't understand, they spend it all, they have nothing left. They don't put anything away. Do we want everything in this world, or do we want to save something for the world to come? King David teaches us here from this verse, those who are wise, those who are righteous, save their reward for the world to come. Ve'ein lo liftoach b'lo ma'asim tovim ach achar sheyasuk b'chol yecholto. And there is no trust without good deeds. But after one exerts himself as much as he can, yale el madregos hachasidus uyos le'inyon zeh. Only then will he ascend to the levels of saintliness appropriate to this end. That is, he will remove love of this world from his heart and replace it with love of Hashem and devote himself to the sanctification of God's name. Sheyotzi avas olam hazeh melibo v'yachnis b'imkomo avas habore baruch hu v'yimsor atzmo al kedushas Hashem yisborach v'yishtasheh bo. And you know what? He will delight in it. Find delight, find pleasure in committing yourself to the Almighty. V'im yasekach, and if a person does so, v'yivtach babori yisborach, and he will put his trust in Hashem. V'yischased imo kimo shehischased im kol hanevim v'chasidim ashrav v'ashrei chelko. Praised is such a person who trusts Hashem, to act in loving kindness with him as he did with all of his prophets and his saintly sages. And this concludes day number 65, my dear friends. We are going to continue tomorrow with day 66.
You've been listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe on a podcast produced by Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. Please help sponsor an episode so we can continue to produce more quality Jewish content for our listeners around the globe. Please visit torchweb.org to donate and partner with us on this incredible endeavor.